We invented a secret language as kids, and 15 years later, it saved her life. I was scrolling through Rachel's Instagram when I noticed she'd posted 17 photos of sunflowers in the past 3 days, and my stomach sank. Rachel and I had created an emergency code back in high school after her ex turned into a stalker. That's what those sunflowers were. Especially since the caption said, "Look at my garden thriving," when Rachel killed every plant she'd ever owned. The next post was her at a farmer's market with the caption, "Strawberry season is the best," even though she was allergic to strawberries. My chest tightened as I recognized what was happening. Sunflowers meant, "I'm in trouble." Strawberries meant, "Call for help." I immediately called her and she answered on the first ring, sounding weirdly cheerful. "Valerie, hey girl, I'm having such an amazing time at this wellness retreat upstate." "That's great," I said carefully. "Which one are you at?" She laughed, but it sounded forced. "Oh, you know, the one with meditation and yoga. They have these beautiful sunflower fields, and tomorrow we're going strawberry picking." There it was again. Sunflowers and strawberries. "Sounds perfect," I said, trying to keep my voice normal. "Hey, remember that time we went camping at Bear Mountain and got lost?" We'd never been camping at Bear Mountain, but it was part of our code. "Oh my god, yes," she said. We walked 12 miles that day. 12 miles was the code response. Someone was listening to this call, and Rachel was being held against her will. "I might come visit you tomorrow," I said. "Would that be cool?" There was a pause, and then Rachel's voice came back slightly higher. "Actually, they don't allow visitors during the first week. But you know, I've been reading so much here, especially those blue books we used to love." Blue books meant she was being drugged. They serve vanilla cake every night, which is amazing. Vanilla cake meant she didn't know where she was. My hands were shaking as I took notes. I checked her earlier posts with fresh eyes and found more code hidden in normal-looking captions. A photo from Tuesday said, "Missing my silver jewelry today," which meant she was being watched constantly. Wednesday's post about loving these 6 a.m. wake-up calls meant there were 6 people involved. Thursday had a picture of her meal with, "The food here reminds me of summer camp," which was our code for barely edible, and "Can't wait to go swimming in the lake," when we both knew Rachel was terrified of lakes because she couldn't swim. Her most recent post from an hour ago made my blood run cold. It was a selfie with the caption, "Having so much fun with my new friends, especially the girl who reminds me of Jessica from 10th grade." Jessica was a girl from our 10th grade class who was kidnapped and murdered. I drove to Rachel's apartment and found her laptop still open on her bed, showing a website for Life Renewal Institute that looked professional, but had only been created 2 weeks ago according to the page source. Her search history showed she'd been researching someone named Dr. Desmond before the website appeared. I Googled him and found old news articles about a psychiatrist who'd lost his license for experimenting on patients without consent. He'd disappeared 5 years ago. The website had testimonials from dozens of women, all around our age, all talking about finding themselves at this retreat. But when I looked closer at their photos, they all had the same glassy expression, and their testimonials used identical phrases. I was about to call the police when Rachel posted again. This time it was a group photo with 12 other women, all in white clothes, all smiling. The caption read, "Beach day with the girls. We collected 13 shells and saw a dolphin." There were no beaches anywhere near upstate New York. 13 shells was our code for immediate danger, and dolphin meant someone had died. I zoomed in on the photo and counted the women. There were 13 in the photo, but Rachel said, "with the girls," like she wasn't counting herself, which meant one of these women was already dead. I tried calling Rachel again with my hands shaking, but it went straight to voicemail. I called 911, but as I was explaining the situation, another Instagram post appeared on Rachel's account. It was a video of her smiling and waving at the camera. "Hey everyone, just wanted to let you know I've decided to extend my stay here indefinitely. This place has changed my life and I'm going to help them expand to new locations. Valerie, I especially think you'd love it here. Check your mailbox tomorrow for a special invitation." My blood went cold because Rachel was blinking in a pattern in the video, another one of our codes, and she was spelling out letters with her blinks. DONTCOMEALONE. I grabbed my phone and started taking screenshots of everything, my fingers moving fast across the screen as I captured the video, the caption, every comment. I created a new folder on my laptop and labeled it with today's date, then started dumping all the screenshots inside while my brain shifted into the organized mode I used for journalism projects back in college. My hands were still shaking, but at least now I had something to do, some way to fight back against the fear that wanted to freeze me in place. I went back through every single one of Rachel's posts from the past week and took screenshots of those too, making sure I had copies of everything before it could disappear. At 2 a.m., I called Suresh because he was the only person I knew who understood online investigation stuff and wouldn't think I was crazy for calling in the middle of the night. He picked up on the third ring sounding groggy but alert. I didn't even say hello, just started talking fast about Rachel and the codes and the video with the blink pattern. He didn't interrupt once, just listened to everything I said. And when I finally stopped to breathe, he told me to send him every screenshot I had while he booted up his computer. I could hear him moving around, the sound of a chair scraping across the floor, and I felt a tiny bit less alone knowing someone else was awake and helping. Suresh walked me through backing up Rachel's entire Instagram account using some archiving tool I'd never heard of before. We created a shared encrypted folder in the cloud, and he started pulling metadata from her posts, while I made a timeline of every coded message I'd found. He explained what he was doing as he worked, talking about IP addresses and location data and EXIF information from the photos. I didn't understand most of it, but I wrote down everything he said anyway. He kept saying we needed to document everything before anything could be deleted, and his calm voice helped me focus, even though my stomach was twisted in knots. At 6 a.m., I was still awake, sitting at my kitchen table and staring at the physical invitation that had arrived in my mailbox sometime yesterday. It was a cream-colored card with embossed sunflowers on the front, and an address for a complimentary wellness consultation printed in fancy script. The fact that they knew where I lived made me want to throw up. Rachel must have given them my name, probably when she was already drugged and trapped, and now they were coming after me too. I picked up the card with shaking hands and looked at the return address, my brain making the connection before I could stop it. I grabbed my phone and took photos of the invitation from every angle, making sure to get clear shots of the postmark and the return address. Then I texted the photos to Suresh and watched as he confirmed that the P.O. box number matched exactly what he'd found linked to the Life Renewal Institute website. My apartment suddenly felt wrong, like someone was watching me through the windows even though I was on the 4th floor. I got up and checked every window lock twice, then checked the front door deadbolt 3 times, my hands still shaking as I moved through each room. By 8 a.m., Suresh sent me his first real findings, and I read through them twice to make sure I understood. The website domain was registered through a Shell LLC with a P.O. box address near Long Island. He'd traced the hosting to something called a CDN that served the Eastern Seaboard. The testimonial photos were stock images with the faces swapped using editing software, which meant none of those women were real. I felt sick reading it, seeing proof that the whole thing was fake, that Rachel had walked into a trap that looked professional and legitimate on the surface. I forced myself to eat breakfast even though I wasn't hungry, making toast and coffee because I knew I needed to think clearly instead of spiraling into panic. While I ate, I got dressed in clean clothes, then sat down with a notebook and wrote out every single piece of the code Rachel and I had created back in high school. Sunflowers meant trouble. Strawberries meant call for help. Blue books meant drugged. Vanilla cake meant she didn't know where she was. I went through the whole list, testing my memory to make sure I hadn't missed any signals in her posts, my pen moving across the paper as I recreated our secret language. At 9 a.m., I called the non-emergency police line and carefully explained that my friend was missing and being held against her will. The woman on the phone asked a bunch of questions and told me to come to the station with any evidence I had. I showed up an hour later with my laptop and a folder full of printed screenshots. The desk officer looked at me like I was wasting his time until I opened the laptop and showed him the decoded messages. Then I explained the blink pattern in the video, showing him how Rachel was spelling out letters with her eyes. His expression changed and he picked up his phone to call someone. Detective Winston Douglas came out and brought me into an interview room that smelled like coffee and old paper. He was a middle-aged guy with tired eyes and gray hair, wearing a wrinkled shirt like he'd been at work all night. He actually listened as I went through everything I'd documented, taking notes on a yellow legal pad and asking questions that showed he understood what I was saying. It took 2 hours to go through all of it. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and told me this matched a pattern they'd been tracking across 3 states. Other women had gone missing after attending wellness seminars or retreats, all around our age, all disappearing into facilities that looked legitimate but weren't. Winston opened an official missing persons case right there and filed something called a preservation request with Instagram to prevent Rachel's account from being deleted. He wrote down his direct phone number on a business card and handed it to me, then looked me straight in the eyes and told me clearly not to go to that facility alone or accept their invitation. He explained that if I went there, I could mess up the investigation or end up trapped myself. I wanted to argue that every minute we waited was another minute Rachel was drugged and held prisoner, but I could see in his face that he got it, that he was moving as fast as the system would let him. I walked out of the station 20 minutes later with a case number written on the back of Winston's card, and my phone already buzzing with a text from Suresh saying he'd found 2 more P.O. boxes registered to the same Shell LLC, one in Connecticut and one in New Jersey. The information made my chest tight because it meant this operation was way bigger than just Rachel, but at least we were building a real case now instead of me just panicking alone in my apartment. I drove home going 5 miles over the speed limit the whole way, my hands gripping the steering wheel too hard while I tried to focus on what I could actually do to help, instead of imagining what Rachel was going through right now. Back at my apartment, I opened my laptop and created a new Gmail account using a fake name, then pulled out the cream-colored invitation card and dialed the phone number printed at the bottom. My hands shook a little as I opened the voice recorder app on my phone and set it next to the laptop speaker, pressing record right before someone picked up on the 3rd ring. A woman answered with this super calm voice that sounded like she was trying to sell me meditation or yoga, asking how she could help me begin my renewal journey. I told her I'd received an invitation and was interested in learning more about the retreat, and she immediately started asking me questions about my stress levels and whether I felt supported by my family and friends. The questions felt weird and too personal for a first phone call, like she was trying to figure out if I had people who would notice if I disappeared. I crafted my answers carefully to sound a bit desperate and isolated, without being so obvious that she'd get suspicious, mentioning that I'd been feeling really overwhelmed lately and didn't have many close friends in the area. She made these sympathetic noises and told me the retreat was specifically designed for women who felt disconnected and needed deep healing work, and then she asked if anyone knew I was calling. I paused like I was thinking about it and said no. I hadn't told anyone because I wanted to make this decision for myself without outside pressure. Her voice got even warmer after that, and she offered me a complimentary weekend retreat starting in 5 days, describing it as a special opportunity for women who were ready to commit to real transformation. I told her it sounded amazing, but I needed some time to think about it and check my schedule, and she immediately pushed back, saying the spots were very limited, and this particular weekend was special. When I held firm and said I really needed to think it over, she tried 2 more times to get me to commit right then, using language about how hesitation was just fear holding me back from the life I deserved. Finally, she accepted that I needed time and told me to call back within 24 hours if I wanted the spot, her voice losing some of that fake warmth as we hung up. I saved the recording and texted Suresh to meet me at the coffee shop near his apartment in an hour, then spent the time making detailed notes about every question she'd asked and how she'd responded to my answers. At the coffee shop, Suresh was already waiting in a back corner booth with his laptop open, and I slid in across from him and pulled out my phone to play the recorded call. His expression got darker and darker as he listened, and when it finished, he pulled up a research article about coercive control and manipulation tactics used by cults and high control groups. He pointed at the screen, showing me how the woman's questions were specifically designed to identify vulnerable targets, asking about isolation, family support, and whether anyone knew about the contact. The pushback when I hesitated was textbook pressure technique, and the language about fear holding me back was a manipulation strategy to make me doubt my own judgment. We sat there for another hour while he showed me more research on cult recruitment patterns, and everything matched what we'd just heard on that phone call. My phone rang while we were still at the coffee shop, and Winston's number showed up on the screen. So I answered, and he told me he'd contacted the FBI because the multi-state pattern suggested possible interstate trafficking. I felt this surge of hope that federal agents would move faster and have more resources. But then he explained that FBI involvement actually meant more bureaucracy and slower coordination between agencies. I bit down the frustration building in my throat and asked what I could do to help speed things up, and he said to keep documenting everything but absolutely stay away from that facility and don't accept their invitation. After I hung up, Suresh could see how upset I was and offered to keep digging into the digital trail while I focused on gathering more evidence from Rachel's social media. That night, I couldn't fall asleep no matter how many times I rolled over and rearranged my pillows. So at 1 a.m., I gave up and opened Rachel's Instagram on my laptop to scroll back through 6 months of posts. I was looking for earlier warning signs I might have missed, any hints that something was wrong before the obvious coded messages started appearing. Around 2 a.m., I found a subtle shift in her posting patterns that started about 8 weeks ago, right after a post where she mentioned attending a free stress management seminar near her gym. Before that seminar, her posts were normal, random photos of her life and meals and friends, but after it, her captions started getting slightly different, more focused on self-improvement and wellness, and finding her authentic self. The change was gradual enough that I hadn't noticed it happening in real time, but looking back through all the posts in sequence, it was obvious something had shifted. My phone lit up with a text from Suresh at midnight saying he'd found something big, and when I called him back, he explained that the P.O. box near Long Island was receiving weekly shipments from a medical supply company. He'd cross-referenced the company name with state licensing databases, and discovered they supplied sedatives and psychiatric medications to licensed medical facilities, which meant someone was ordering controlled substances and having them delivered to that P.O. box. The next morning, I made coffee and opened my laptop to do a reverse image search on the group photo Rachel had posted, the one with all the women in white clothes. I uploaded the image and waited while the search engine processed it, my coffee getting cold in my hand as results started populating the screen. 2 of the women in that photo appeared in missing persons databases, one from Virginia and one from Pennsylvania. Both reported missing within the last 4 months after telling family they were attending wellness retreats. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone as I screenshot the missing persons reports and sent them to Winston with a message explaining what I'd found. He called me back 50 minutes later, sounding way more urgent than before, telling me he was escalating the case and bringing in a task force to coordinate with the other jurisdictions. But then he said I needed to not make any more contact with the facility until they could get surveillance authorization from a judge, which could take several more days. I agreed because I knew arguing wouldn't help, but I felt physically sick knowing Rachel was drugged and watched while we waited for paperwork to get approved. I spent the afternoon on Facebook searching for the families of the 2 women I'd identified from the photo, finding their pages and crafting careful messages, asking if they'd heard from their daughters recently and mentioning I might have information. One of the mothers responded within minutes, her message desperate and asking me to please tell her anything I knew about where her daughter might be. I called her within 5 minutes and she picked up before the first ring finished. Her voice cracked as she said hello, and I could hear she'd been crying for hours. I explained who I was and how I found her daughter in the photo Rachel posted, describing the Instagram codes and what they meant. She started sobbing so hard I could barely understand her words. Something about police saying her daughter went voluntarily, and they couldn't do anything about an adult choosing to attend a retreat. I asked if her daughter had ever mentioned anything about stress management seminars or wellness programs before she disappeared, and the mother said yes. About 4 months ago, she went to a free seminar at a community center. After that seminar, her daughter started talking about finding herself and needing to reset her life. Then 3 months ago, she said she was going to a retreat upstate and would be out of contact for a while. The mother never heard from her again except for a few text messages that didn't sound like her daughter's normal way of writing. I took detailed notes while she talked, asking about the seminar location and any names her daughter mentioned. She gave me everything she could remember, and I promised to share what I found with the detective handling Rachel's case. After we hung up, I immediately called Winston and explained about the Virginia missing persons case, giving him the report number and the mother's contact information. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he said this changed everything, because now they had a pattern spanning multiple states. I sent him screenshots of both missing persons reports while we were still on the phone, and he said he'd contact the other jurisdictions immediately to coordinate. Suresh texted me 10 minutes later saying he found a third P.O. box registered to the same shell company in Connecticut, and a fourth one in New Jersey. I forwarded that to Winston too, and watched the case grow from my missing friend into something way bigger and more organized. I spent the next hour searching for any journalism contacts who might cover this kind of story, and remembered a former colleague had interviewed an investigative reporter who specialized in predatory wellness scams. I found her email and sent a carefully worded message explaining I had information about a fake retreat operation and asking if she'd be willing to talk off the record. Laura Hendricks responded within 30 minutes saying she could meet me the next morning at a coffee shop downtown. I showed up early and recognized her immediately from her author photo, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes that seemed to catalog everything in the room. She ordered coffee and listened to my entire story without taking notes, just absorbing every detail with the focus of someone who'd heard similar things before. When I finished, she leaned back and told me she'd been tracking unlicensed practitioners running fake wellness retreats for 3 years. She said they preyed on women going through difficult times, promised transformation and healing, then isolated them and drained their bank accounts before shutting down and relocating. Most victims were too embarrassed to report what happened, and the operators moved fast enough that she could never publish before they disappeared. I asked if she'd be willing to help expose this operation, and she said yes, but she needed solid evidence and ideally someone willing to go on record. I told her I'd go on record eventually if it helped get Rachel out safely, and she nodded like that was the answer she expected. She gave me her direct cell number and said to call her immediately if anything developed, because media pressure could move things faster than waiting for the legal system. That evening, Suresh picked me up and we drove to the P.O. box location with cameras and a thermos of coffee. We parked across the street with a clear view of the boxes and settled in to watch. For 2 hours, nothing happened except regular mail carriers making deliveries. Then around 6, a black van with no company logos pulled up to the curb. A man in jeans and a plain jacket got out and opened one of the P.O. boxes using a key, loading several packages into the back of the van without signing anything or showing ID. Suresh took photos of the van's license plate and the man's face while I recorded video on my phone. The van pulled away, and we followed it at a distance, staying back far enough that we wouldn't be obvious but close enough to track where it went. It headed east through rush hour traffic, and we almost lost it twice at red lights, but managed to keep it in sight. After 40 minutes, the van merged onto the highway heading toward the coast, and Suresh said it looked like they were going to the ferry terminal. We followed until heavy traffic made us lose visual contact, but we were close enough to confirm the van was definitely heading toward the water. Suresh pulled over and opened his laptop, searching for maps of barrier islands accessible by ferry from this area. He found 3 possibilities, all with private properties large enough to house some kind of facility. I called Winston from the car and explained what we'd just seen, the black van picking up packages and heading toward the ferry terminal. He sounded frustrated when he told me that tailing suspects was dangerous and could compromise the investigation if we got spotted. I started to argue, but he cut me off and said the ferry terminal lead was valuable, and he'd coordinate with the Marine unit to investigate properties on the barrier islands. He made me promise not to follow any more vans or do anything else that could alert the operation we were investigating them. I agreed, but felt useless just waiting while Rachel was drugged and trapped somewhere. The next morning, Winston called and I could hear the frustration in his voice before he even started talking. He said the judge pushed back on his warrant request, claiming that Instagram codes and concerned friends didn't constitute probable cause for raiding a private wellness facility. I wanted to scream at how slow everything moved, but I forced myself to stay calm and ask what evidence would be enough to convince the judge. Winston said he needed either direct testimony from someone who'd been inside the facility or proof of criminal activity beyond circumstantial social media posts. I thanked him and hung up feeling defeated. Then my phone buzzed with a text from Laura. She sent me a link to an anonymous forum post from 6 months ago, where someone claiming to be a nurse described quitting a wellness retreat after being asked to give sedatives to patients without proper consent forms. The post mentioned that staff called the sedation protocol Blue Books, the exact same code Rachel had used in her Instagram caption. I screenshot the forum post and sent it to Winston immediately while texting Suresh to see if he could trace who posted it. He called back 20 minutes later saying the account was created through a VPN and only ever made that single post before being abandoned. Laura texted suggesting we try reaching out through the forum to see if the person still monitored it, so I created an anonymous account and posted a careful response asking if anyone had more information about wellness retreats using Blue Book protocols. I hit submit and sat staring at my phone, hoping whoever posted originally would see it and respond. 2 days crawled by with my laptop open constantly, refreshing the forum page every few minutes even though I knew notifications would alert me to any response. I couldn't eat much and barely slept. Just kept checking Rachel's Instagram for new posts while running through worst-case scenarios in my head. Suresh texted me updates about his continued research into the shell companies, but we weren't finding anything new without more inside information. On the third morning, my anonymous forum account showed a private message notification, and my hands shook so hard I almost dropped my phone. The message was short and careful, saying the sender's name was Reina, and she might have information about the place I was asking about, but she would only meet in person at a public location. She suggested a diner 2 hours north and made it clear I had to come alone because she was taking a big risk even talking to me. I screenshot the message immediately and called Winston, explaining about the forum post and this woman reaching out. He listened without interrupting, and then told me firmly that if I was going to meet this person, he wanted plainclothes officers positioned nearby in case it was a trap or the situation went bad. I agreed because honestly the thought of meeting a stranger connected to this operation made me nervous, even in a public diner. Suresh called right after I hung up with Winston and said he wanted to come with me, but I explained that Reina had been specific about meeting alone, and we couldn't risk scaring her off when she might be our only inside source. He made me promise to keep him on the phone during the entire 2-hour drive and to text him the diner's address so he could track my location. The drive felt endless even with Suresh talking to me the whole time, his voice keeping me calm while my mind raced through what this woman might tell me and whether the information would be enough to get Rachel out. I spotted the plainclothes officers as soon as I pulled into the diner parking lot because Winston had texted me their descriptions, 2 people in separate cars positioned to watch the entrance. Inside the diner, I found Reina sitting in a back booth, a woman who looked to be in her 40s wearing nurse scrubs under an unzipped jacket. Her eyes kept moving around the diner, scanning faces and exits like she expected someone to grab her at any moment. I slid into the booth across from her and she studied my face for a long moment before speaking quietly. She told me she had worked at the facility for 6 weeks before quitting because her conscience couldn't handle what she was seeing anymore. Her hands trembled slightly as she wrapped them around her coffee cup and explained that ever since she left 3 months ago, she'd been scared they would come after her for knowing too much. I asked her to tell me everything about the place, and she took a shaky breath before describing a converted private rehab facility located on a barrier island that you could only reach by private ferry. Dr. Desmond ran what he called intensive renewal therapy on women who thought they were attending a normal wellness retreat. The women got gradually sedated over their first few days there, then isolated from any outside contact, while being put through experimental treatments that Reina said felt more like psychological torture than therapy. She grabbed a napkin from the dispenser and started sketching a rough layout of the facility, marking where the women's rooms were located, where medications got stored in a locked cabinet, and where security watched camera feeds from a central monitoring station. Reina mentioned that renewal weekends happened twice a month when new women arrived by ferry, and others supposedly got released, though she suspected some women never actually left the island. Her pen paused over the napkin and she added one more detail that made my stomach turn, telling me the facility had an industrial incinerator that was officially for medical waste disposal. She had seen them burning what looked like personal belongings and documents one night when she worked a late shift, not medical waste at all. I kept my voice steady even though I felt sick, and asked her about the security patterns and how many staff members worked there at any given time. Reina said there were usually 6 people on site including Dr. Desmond himself, with 2 security guards who rotated through 12-hour shifts and 3 medical assistants who handled the daily sedation protocols and basic patient care. She described the security as serious but not like military level, mostly depending on the island's isolation, and keeping the women too drugged to think clearly enough to plan any kind of escape. I pulled out my phone and asked if I could record what she was telling me, and she hesitated before nodding and giving permission. She talked for another 20 minutes about specific details of how the facility operated, the fake intake paperwork they used, and the supply chain for medications. Before she stood to leave, she made me promise that if she gave a formal statement to the police, they would guarantee her some kind of protection from retaliation because she was genuinely scared of what Dr. Desmond might do to someone who exposed his operation. Then she leaned across the table and warned me in an urgent whisper that Dr. Desmond had been talking about shutting down this location soon because he was getting worried about too much exposure, which meant Rachel and the other women might get moved somewhere else or worse. I waited until Reina left the diner before rushing out to the parking lot and calling Winston immediately, my words tumbling over each other as I explained what I'd just learned. He told me to stay put and that he was driving out to meet Reina himself, bringing a victim advocate and a prosecutor who could discuss possible immunity deals to make her comfortable giving an official statement. I gave him Reina's phone number from our message exchange and watched from my car as she pulled back into the parking lot 30 minutes later when Winston arrived. They talked in his vehicle for over 3 hours while I sat in the diner drinking coffee and trying not to think about Rachel being drugged and trapped on that island. When Winston finally came inside to find me, his expression was grim but determined. He said that Reina's testimony combined with all the missing persons cases we had connected gave him enough evidence for a warrant, but the judge wanted to review everything carefully before signing off on raiding a private medical facility. He estimated it would take 48 hours before they could actually move on the place, and I felt panic rising in my chest because Reina had specifically said the next renewal weekend was in 2 days. That night, I sat at my laptop filing a formal complaint with the state medical board against Dr. Desmond, typing his real name along with the 3 aliases Reina had provided. I attached every piece of evidence we'd collected, the screenshots from Rachel's Instagram, the shell company documents Suresh had found, and Raina's written statement about the experimental treatments. The online form took me an hour to complete because I kept stopping to add more details, knowing this wouldn't result in any immediate action, but it would create an official paper trail. If Dr. Desmond tried to relocate and start over somewhere else, this complaint would follow him and make it harder for him to get any kind of medical credentials. I hit submit at 11:47 p.m. and watched the confirmation screen load, feeling like I'd done something concrete even though I knew bureaucratic processes moved slowly. My phone rang at 2 a.m. and I grabbed it off my nightstand, seeing Suresh's name on the screen. He sounded wired on coffee and adrenaline as he explained he'd been analyzing the video metadata from Rachel's Instagram post for the past 6 hours. The CDN signal data showed the upload had bounced through a cell tower that only served one barrier island off the coast, and when he cross-referenced that location with property records, he found a defunct rehab facility. The facility was owned by another Shell LLC, but it had the same registered agent as the Life Renewal Institute, which meant it was definitely connected to Dr. Desmond's operation. Suresh sent me the property address and GPS coordinates while we were still on the phone, his voice getting more excited as he explained how he'd traced the ownership through 4 different shell companies. I pulled up the coordinates on my laptop and stared at the satellite image of a large building complex on a small island, my chest getting tight as I realized this was where Rachel was being held. After hanging up with Suresh, I couldn't even think about sleeping, so I spent the rest of the night researching everything I could find about that property. The county licensing database had old records from when it operated as a legitimate rehab center, showing building permits and inspection reports dating back 15 years. I found a news article from 5 years ago about the facility closing after multiple health code violations and complaints from former patients about inadequate care. The property had been sold twice since then, each time to a different LLC that I couldn't trace to any real person. The licensing records showed the facility had boat access with a private dock, a helicopter landing pad on the roof, and enough beds for 30 patients spread across 3 floors. Everything about it was perfect for Dr. Desmond's operation, isolated and large enough to hold multiple women while keeping them completely cut off from the outside world. At 8 a.m., my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize, and I almost let it go to voicemail before realizing I needed to maintain my cover as a potential recruit. The same woman with the overly smooth voice from before reminded me about the complimentary retreat weekend starting tomorrow, her tone friendly but with an edge of pressure underneath. She told me they'd love to send a car to pick me up at 10 a.m., making it sound like a generous offer instead of the trap I knew it was. My hands were shaking as I forced myself to sound interested and grateful, telling her I'd decided to accept and asking about what I should bring. She gave me a short list of comfortable clothes and toiletries, emphasizing that I wouldn't need my phone or laptop because the retreat focused on disconnecting from technology. As soon as I hung up, I called Winston, my words coming out fast as I explained that I'd just accepted the pickup. He cut me off immediately and told me absolutely not. There was no way he was letting me go to that facility, his voice harder than I'd ever heard it. We argued for 20 minutes with me explaining the value of having someone on the inside who could confirm Rachel's location and gather evidence, while Winston kept saying it was too dangerous, and they were close to getting the warrant anyway. I pushed back about the timeline, reminding him that Raina had said Dr. Desmond was planning to shut down soon, and we might not have another chance. Winston finally agreed to a compromise where I would let them pick me up, but plainclothes officers would tail the vehicle the entire way. If they took me to the ferry terminal heading toward that island, the operation would move immediately with or without the warrant, using the legal concept of urgent circumstances to justify the raid. He made me promise 3 times that I would not get on any boat or go to the actual facility, that the pickup was just to confirm the location, and then his team would move in. Laura called an hour later to tell me her editor had approved a story about predatory wellness retreats and unlicensed medical practitioners, her voice careful as she explained she'd been working on it for the past 2 days. She'd interviewed Raina and 2 of the other rescued women we'd identified, building a solid case about the pattern of abuse. The story was ready to publish as soon as I gave the word, but we agreed to hold it until after the rescue operation, so the media attention wouldn't spook Dr. Desmond into running. Having the article ready felt like insurance, a way to make sure this story got out even if something went wrong with the raid. I spent the afternoon preparing for the pickup, packing a small bag with clothes and toiletries exactly like a real retreat participant would bring. Suresh came over and helped me hide a backup phone in a secret pocket he'd sewn into the lining of my jacket, the device so small it was barely noticeable. He programmed it with emergency contacts and made me practice sending the coded text messages we'd agreed on, where different phrases would signal different levels of danger. Every 2 hours, I was supposed to text him a simple weather update, and if I missed a check-in or sent our panic code phrase, he would alert Winston immediately. Winston and 3 other officers came to my apartment at 6 p.m. to brief me on what to expect and what to do if things went wrong. They gave me a panic button device that looked exactly like a lipstick tube, showing me how to twist the bottom 3 times to activate a silent GPS alert that would bring the entire tactical team to my location. Winston made me repeat the safety protocols 3 times, walking through each scenario of what could happen and how I should respond. He told me that if I felt unsafe at any point, even just a bad feeling, I should activate the panic button and they would come in immediately, regardless of the warrant status or the plan. The way he looked at me when he said it made me realize how worried he actually was, but he wasn't going to stop me because he knew we needed this confirmation. That evening, I was checking my phone every few minutes when Rachel posted a new photo to Instagram. A sunset view from a window with the caption saying she couldn't wait for renewal weekend tomorrow, and everything was about to change. I zoomed in on the image immediately, my eyes scanning every detail until I spotted her reflection in the glass. She was holding up 2 fingers in what most people would think was a peace sign, but I recognized it instantly as our code for the second floor. Her hand was positioned on the right side of the reflection, which meant east side of the building. I screenshot the photo and sent it to Winston along with Raina's layout sketch, my message explaining that Rachel had just confirmed her exact location in the facility. Winston texted back within seconds saying they had the information, and the tactical team was positioned on the mainland, ready to move as soon as I confirmed the ferry route. I stared at Rachel's reflection in that window for a long time, seeing how thin her face looked and the tired expression in her eyes even in the small image. Tomorrow morning, I would get in that car and let them take me toward the island, trusting that Winston's team would follow, and that our childhood code system would be enough to get us both out alive. I screenshot Rachel's reflection in that window photo and sent it straight to Winston with Raina's layout sketch attached, typing out that Rachel just confirmed second floor east wing. His reply comes back in under a minute saying the tactical team is already positioned on the mainland and the Marine unit has boats ready to move the second. I confirm I'm at the facility. I stare at my phone screen reading his message 3 times, feeling the reality settle in that tomorrow I'm actually doing this. Sleep doesn't come easy that night as I lie in bed running through every possible scenario of what could go wrong. I keep thinking about Rachel being drugged and watched, about the woman who died that the dolphin code referenced, about Dr. Desmond's cold eyes in those old news photos. But every time panic starts rising, I remember Rachel using our code to ask for help, remember her blinking out that warning in the video, and I know I can't let her down after 15 years of friendship. At 6 a.m., I'm already dressed in comfortable clothes that look like something a stressed woman would wear to a wellness retreat, my small bag packed with toiletries and a change of clothes. I'm double-checking that the backup phone is hidden properly in the jacket lining when I see a black sedan pull up outside my building through the window. It's the same type of vehicle Suresh and I saw at the P.O. box, dark windows and no company markings. My hands shake as I grab my bag and head downstairs, texting Suresh that the pickup just arrived. The driver is a woman who looks about 50 wearing yoga pants and a flowing top, her smile bright and welcoming as she opens the back door for me. She tells me her name is Melissa and that I'm going to have such an amazing experience at the retreat. I slide into the back seat and she starts talking about how transformative the program is, how it changed her entire life, how I'm making the best decision I've ever made. Her voice has that same too smooth quality as the woman on the phone, like she's reading from a script. I play along and tell her I'm excited but nervous, pulling out my phone to text Suresh my location as we start driving. Melissa keeps up the cheerful small talk about meditation and self-discovery while I watch our route, noting that we're heading exactly toward the ferry terminal like we predicted. I send Suresh updates every few minutes with street names and landmarks, keeping my texts casual in case Melissa glances back. Winston sends me a message saying they have visual confirmation on the sedan, and the team is moving into position. He tells me to stay calm and just follow whatever normal process they have unless I feel threatened. The ferry terminal comes into view and Melissa parks in a lot reserved for retreat transport vehicles. She leads me onto a private ferry that's much smaller than the public ones, just a dozen seats and a small cabin. The 40-minute ride feels longer as the boat rocks through choppy water, and I force myself to memorize everything I can see. The island comes into view gradually, mostly tree-covered with one large building visible near the shore. It looks like an old mansion that's been renovated, exactly matching the converted rehab facility Suresh found in the property records. I study the exterior layout, counting windows and noting the dock setup, the walking paths, the security cameras mounted on the corners. We dock at a private pier where 2 staff members are waiting, both wearing white linen clothes and those same serene expressions Raina described. They greet me warmly, and one of them asks for my phone and bag for safekeeping during my digital detox. I expected this, but still feel exposed and vulnerable as I hand over my regular phone, grateful the backup is hidden in my jacket. They lead me up a stone path toward the mansion and I count my steps, noting the distance from the dock to the building entrance. Inside the foyer is decorated in calming neutrals with soft music playing, and they bring me to a small consultation room with comfortable chairs and a water feature. Dr. Desmond walks in and I recognize him immediately from the old news photos, though he's thinner now and his hair is completely gray. He's wearing casual, expensive clothes and his smile is warm, but his eyes are cold and calculating as he looks at me. He sits across from me and asks gentle questions about my stress levels, my family relationships, whether I have close friends who know I'm here. I answer carefully, playing the role of desperate woman seeking help while scanning the room for cameras and exits. I spot 2 cameras in the corners and note that the door locks from the outside. Dr. Desmond nods along to my answers and tells me I'm clearly carrying a lot of tension that their program can help release. After about 20 minutes, he tells me I'm an excellent candidate for their intensive program, and he's excited to begin my renewal journey. A staff member brings in a cup of tea on a small tray, setting it in front of me with an encouraging smile. I lift the cup and smell it, detecting the bitter chemical scent underneath the chamomile that Raina warned me about. I pretend to take a sip while actually letting most of it spill onto the potted plant next to my chair, then fake a drowsy expression and tell Dr. Desmond the tea is helping me relax already. He looks pleased and tells the staff member to show me to my room so I can rest before dinner. They lead me up a staircase to the second floor and turn right into the east wing, exactly where Rachel indicated in her photo. I count the doors as we pass and spot Rachel 3 doors down being escorted by another staff member toward what they're calling a renewal session. She looks so thin and tired, her skin pale and her movements slow like she's heavily sedated. But her eyes widen slightly when she sees me, and I give the tiniest nod to confirm I'm here to help. The staff member opens a door to a simple room with a bed, dresser, and small bathroom, telling me to rest and someone will come get me for dinner. As soon as the door closes, I pull out the panic button lipstick from my pocket and twist the bottom 3 times to activate it, then hide it behind the heating vent where it won't be found during a room search. I take out the backup phone and send Winston a quick text saying I'm inside the facility and have visual confirmation on Rachel. His response comes back immediately telling me the team is moving in within 30 minutes, and I should stay in my room if possible. I sit on the bed and check the time, watching the minutes crawl by as I hear footsteps and voices in the hallway outside. Staff members move between rooms and I can hear other women crying or talking in slow, drugged voices that make my chest tight. I peek out my door carefully and see a security guard stationed at the stairwell, a big guy in dark clothes with a radio on his belt. I make mental notes of his position and the layout of the hallway, counting the doors between my room and Rachel's, looking for fire exits or alternate stairways. The next 20 minutes feel like hours as I wait for Winston's team to arrive, my heart pounding every time I hear footsteps approaching my door. A loud alarm starts blaring through the building and I jump off the bed, my whole body going stiff with fear and hope mixed together. Shouting comes from downstairs, multiple voices yelling over each other, and I hear the security guard at the stairwell talking fast into his radio. I crack my door open wider and peek out, watching staff members in white clothes running down the hallway toward the stairs, their calm faces replaced with panic. Through the window at the end of the hall, I spot boats cutting through the water toward the dock, official-looking vessels with lights flashing. My chest gets tight with relief because Winston actually did it. They're here. More shouting echoes up the stairwell, and I hear someone yelling about locking down the building, about securing the patients, about moving them to the basement. I step further into the hallway and see other doors opening, confused women looking out with glazed eyes. A loudspeaker crackles outside and Winston's voice booms across the property, clear and strong. He tells everyone to exit the building with their hands visible, to come out slowly, to not resist. More yelling from downstairs, and I recognize Desmond's voice, high and angry, shouting orders about destroying evidence and getting to the boats. I don't wait anymore. I run down the hallway toward Rachel's door, counting the rooms like she showed me in the photo. Her door has a simple lock on the outside, the kind meant to keep drugged people in, and I twist the handle hard. It doesn't budge, so I step back and slam my shoulder into it, the cheap wood cracking on the second hit. The lock breaks and the door swings open, showing Rachel sitting on her bed in white clothes that match everyone else. She looks so thin and pale, her eyes unfocused and confused, but when she sees me, her face crumples. She starts crying and tries to stand up, but her legs are wobbly. I rush over and grab her arms, pulling her up and wrapping my arm around her waist to steady her. She leans against me and keeps crying, saying my name over and over. 2 other women have come out of their rooms into the hallway, both looking scared and lost. I tell them to follow me, that the police are here, that we're getting out. One of them nods and helps support the other one who can barely walk. I remember Raina's layout sketch and head toward the back of the building where she marked a service stairway. We move slowly because Rachel and the other women are so drugged they can barely coordinate their movements. The alarm keeps blaring and I hear more shouting, the sound of things breaking downstairs. We reach the back stairs and start going down, me holding Rachel tight while the 2 other women follow behind us. We're only halfway down when a staff member appears at the bottom, a woman in scrubs who tries to block our path. She holds up her hands and tells us to go back to our rooms, that everything is fine, that we need our evening medication. I push past her without stopping, pulling Rachel with me and telling the other women to keep moving. The staff member grabs at my arm, but I shake her off and keep going toward the sound of police voices. We burst through a back door into cool evening air, and Winston is right there with 3 officers in tactical gear. He sees us and immediately calls for medical help, his face showing relief and concern. He guides us away from the building toward a clear area where paramedics are setting up. The scene outside looks like controlled chaos. Police officers are everywhere, some securing the building perimeter while others handcuff staff members who are being led out with their hands behind their backs. Paramedics have set up a triage area with equipment and stretchers, and more women are being brought out from different exits. I stay right next to Rachel as an EMT in blue gloves checks her pulse and shines a light in her eyes. He asks her questions she can barely answer, then starts an IV line to flush the drugs from her system. Rachel keeps crying and holding my hand, saying she's sorry over and over. I tell her it's not her fault, that I found her, that she's safe now. Winston comes over and crouches down next to us, his face serious. He tells me they found 12 women total inside the facility, all of them showing signs of heavy sedation. They also found extensive records in Desmond's office, detailed notes about experimental treatments and drug combinations. My stomach turns, but Winston keeps talking, explaining that Desmond got away through a boat access point on the other side of the island before they could secure the whole perimeter. He says they've already issued warrants and alerts across multiple states, that every law enforcement agency is looking for him now. Rachel's IV is running, and the EMT says she needs to go to the hospital for observation and proper detox. They load her onto a stretcher, and I climb into the ambulance with her, refusing to leave her side. At the hospital, they admit Rachel to a ward for observation and start her on a detox protocol to clear the sedatives from her system. I sit in the chair next to her bed while doctors and nurses come in and out, checking her vitals and asking questions. She's groggy but more alert than before, and she keeps thanking me for remembering the code. She says she was so scared I wouldn't understand the Instagram messages, that no one would figure it out in time. I hold her hand and tell her I would never forget our code, that I knew something was wrong the second I saw those sunflowers. After the doctors leave, I go to the bathroom and finally let myself break down, crying into my hands while my whole body shakes. I wash my face and pull myself together, then go back to sit with Rachel until she falls asleep. Over the next few days, the case explodes into something huge. The FBI takes over coordination because the evidence shows Desmond was operating facilities in at least 4 different states. Winston calls me with updates, telling me about the investigation expanding, about more victims being identified. Laura's story publishes in a major newspaper with interviews from Raina and 2 of the other rescued women, detailing how the fake wellness retreat operated. Tips start flooding in from people who recognize the pattern, who have family members who disappeared after attending similar programs. The hotline set up for the investigation gets hundreds of calls. Rachel stays in the hospital for 5 days while they monitor her recovery and start her on therapy for the trauma. I visit every day, bringing her real food and sitting with her through the bad moments. 2 weeks later, Rachel is staying at my apartment because she can't go back to her place yet. Can't handle being alone. She's getting stronger every day, going to therapy 3 times a week and slowly starting to feel like herself again. We've created new emergency codes that don't rely on social media because she can't look at Instagram without having panic attacks. Winston calls one afternoon to give us an update. They've arrested 4 staff members who worked at the facility and shut down 2 other locations connected to Desmond's network. Desmond himself is still out there somewhere, but Winston says they're confident they'll find him eventually. Rachel and I are planning a real vacation once she's strong enough to travel. Somewhere with beaches and sunshine, no wellness retreats or meditation or sunflowers. Just the 2 of us rebuilding the trust and friendship that saved her life, proving that the secret language we invented as kids 15 years ago was worth remembering. And that is the takeaway from this one. I try to make sure there is always something useful tucked inside the story. If even one small thing stood out to you, I am happy. Subscribe so you do not miss the next one.